Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Our Take, a podcast you can trust. I'm your host, LukeMan97, and today we're going to be discussing pesticides. Now, pesticides, what are they? So basically, pesticides are chemicals that remove unwanted pests, kill them, in other words. Basically, and unwanted pests include plants, like unwanted plants like weeds, insects that you don't want around, or funguses, and other things like that. Kind of like mold and stuff like that. And so basically there's three different big groups of pesticides. There's herbicides, which as it sounds, controls weeds and plants. And there's there is insecticides, which are the ones like it sounds, they kill insects. And third is fungicides, which, like fungicides, as it sounds as well, kills fungi. So, let's start talking about this a little bit. So basically, insecticides kill insects, and the thing is with these types of things, okay, with pesticides, there is a lot of different problems sometimes, because over time insects or plants or even funguses can develop resistance to pesticides. Now, the way this happens is if pesticides are sprayed but somehow a few insects survive or a few plants survive, and then, or maybe the pesticides weren't strong enough to kill them, and then those plants or insects reproduce, and they make more plants and insects that are this time resistant to the pesticide. So this time it takes more and more pesticides to kill it, and if more resistance keeps being developed, it just takes more and more and more pesticides to kill it. Now, we've seen this happen in the past with the use of DDT, which was a pesticide used to control insects, and I think it's banned in the US now, but I think it's still used in other countries sometimes. But basically, this chemical, ants began developing resistance to it, and so they had to keep using more and more of it. And as we'll learn later, DDT is a very toxic chemical, so yes, they can develop resistance to it. And not only can insects develop resistance, but there's also two different types of pesticides. So basically, there's non-persistent and there's persistent. So let's break down those terms a little bit more. Persistent is a pesticide that is more effective at killing what you're trying to kill, but it stays around in the soil longer and it's more toxic, so it just stays around longer and becomes more of a problem. So normally you don't really want persistent unless you're really trying to kill something. But anyways, I'm reading here online at wecan.com. It says the terms persistent and non-persistent refer to how long a pesticide stays in the environment. Non-persistent pesticides break down in the environment more quickly than persistent pesticides. Persistent pesticides have a greater potential to accumulate in organisms. When a persistent bioaccumulates, predator animals higher on the food chain accumulate more pesticides in their body. This happens because more of their food and water sources also contain the persistent chemical, which that leads us perfectly into our next area of discussion. So basically, what can happen is with persistent pesticides, they stay around a long time. So for example, if you spray a plant with a pesticide and then let's say a small animal like a mouse or something comes along and eats that plant, they'll of course have some pesticides in their body. Now, if a bigger animal like a cat comes and eats that mouse, then the pesticides will actually become more in the next animal. So the more animals that eat something with a pesticide in it, if a mouse eats a plant, then a cat eats a mouse, and then let's say a fox eats a cat, then the fox is going to have a much larger amount of pesticides concentration in their body than the mouse would have after it ate the plant. So it can happen in humans too. Like if the food is sprayed with pesticides and then let's say, I don't know, a cow eats that food like accidentally or something, then more pesticides will be in that meat, And like, you know, if they feed the cows grain that were sprayed, then technically that's more pesticides that we're eating than than if we just ate the plant, the grain. So yeah, it's very bad to have persistent in some ways because it just accumulates and accumulates. Whereas non-persistent is more kind of like organic, and it just breaks down pretty quick, and it doesn't really cause a ton of harm to the environment or people or animals. Um, Here I'm going to read from a different website, sciencing.com now. It says persistent chemicals are those chemicals that tend to endure in the environment for years after they're released into it. It takes longer to remove them from the environment after their use is over. For instance, if pesticides containing persistent chemicals have been sprayed, it is difficult to get the chemicals out of the environment even after they have served their purpose. Examples of we're not going to talk about that. But anyways, non-persistent chemicals are those chemicals that linger only a brief period after they're released in the environment. The category, okay, we're not, but yeah, it only lingers briefly, long enough to kill something, but then it goes away pretty soon after. So that in a nutshell is pesticides. Pesticides are kind of necessary, honestly, these days with how big these farms are. It's kind of impossible not to have pesticides, but they are very harmful to humans and animals. So it's best, I would say, if we use non-persistent pesticides as long as there's not a resistance, because then it will not accumulate and stay in the environment for a long period of time. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I hope this has been informational to you guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.